subscribe to Morasel, where we delve deep into the captivating events, remarkable civilizations, and influential figures that shape the world as we know it today. Hit the subscribe button now and become part of our growing community of history enthusiasts. Let's uncover the mysteries of the past together. Gaza's history spans over 4,000 years, marked by the rise and fall of empires, conquests, and cultural transformations. Originally a Canaanite settlement, Gaza was a bustling trade hub with mud brick houses and fortified walls. It later fell under Egyptian rule, where pharaohs established administrative centers and temples adorned with hieroglyphs. For 350 years, the city was influenced by Egyptian art and culture, before becoming one of the Philistine strongholds, known for its warriors, sea trade, and monumental structures. By 730 BC, Gaza was absorbed into the Assyrian Empire, its skyline dominated by ziggurats and military outposts. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great besieged the city, and after a fierce battle, Gaza lay in ruins, its stone walls shattered and streets covered in debris. The surviving inhabitants were displaced, and the city was resettled by Bedouin tribes, bringing a new era of desert-influenced architecture and customs. Over the following centuries, control of Gaza shifted between the Seleucids of Syria and the Ptolemies of Egypt, each leaving their mark with grand temples, bustling markets, and military fortifications. In 96 BC, the Hasmoneans besieged and captured the city, introducing elements of Jewish culture and governance. During the Roman era, Gaza became a thriving Mediterranean port city, its streets lined with colonnaded forums, amphitheaters, and ornate villas. The city was rebuilt by General Pompey Magnus and later granted to Herod the Great, who adorned it with majestic palaces and marble statues. A 500-member Senate governed Gaza, and its economy flourished under Roman patronage. Christianity took root under Saint Porphyrius, who oversaw the destruction of 8 towering pagan temples between 396 and 420 AD. By 637 AD, the Muslim general Amr ibn al-As led his forces into Gaza, and as the crescent banners rose above the city, most of its inhabitants embraced Islam. The city's skyline was transformed with the construction of mosques, domed structures, and vibrant souks. Gaza's strategic position made it a target for various powers. The Crusaders seized control in 1100 AD, fortifying the city with stone castles and high ramparts. However, Saladin's forces, with curved swords and war banners, reclaimed it soon after. By the late 13th century, Gaza became part of the Mamluk Sultanate, and its markets thrived with silk, spices, and exotic goods. During the 16th century, under the Ottoman Ridwan dynasty, the city experienced a golden age, characterized by towering minarets, grand caravanserais, and intricate calligraphy-covered walls. The 20th century brought seismic changes. The city suffered devastating earthquakes in 1903 and 1914, reducing stone houses to rubble. In 1917, British forces, armed with rifles and armored vehicles, captured Gaza during World War I. Under British Mandate rule, Gaza significantly expanded, with modern buildings and European-style streets emerging. By 1948, thousands of Palestinian refugees, carrying bundles of belongings and hopes for return, arrived in Gaza following the Arab-Israeli War. The city later became a focal point in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, culminating in the Israel-Hamas war, leaving entire districts reduced to rubble and a humanitarian crisis unfolding on the streets. Settlement in the Gaza region dates back to 3300 to 3000 BCE, when Tel Es-Sakin, located south of present-day Gaza City, emerged as an ancient Egyptian fortress built within Canaanite territory. The settlement thrived as Canaanite merchants traded grain, olives, and livestock with the Egyptians. Mud brick walls fortified the city, and bronze tools and pottery workshops dotted the landscape. However, as Egypt's economic focus shifted to cedar trade with Lebanon, Gaza's strategic importance declined. The bustling port city saw its harbors empty, and by the early Bronze Age too, Tel Es-Sakin was virtually abandoned. By 2500 BCE, the local Canaanite population began to resettle Tel Es-Sakin, leading to another period of prosperity. The marketplaces buzzed again, and trade routes reconnected the city with surrounding regions. However, in 2250 BCE, a catastrophic collapse of civilization swept through the area. Gaza's cities were abandoned, their stone structures left in ruins, and the region fell under the control of semi-nomadic herders who built pastoral camps with simple family dwellings. These nomadic tribes thrived in the early Bronze Age for raising flocks and living in tent-like settlements. As centuries passed, a new urban center began to rise inland along the Wadi Gaza riverbed. This was Tel El-Ejul, a thriving Canaanite city-state. Close by, a satellite settlement called Al-Magraka developed, positioned less than 1 kilometer from Tel El-Ejul. By the Middle Bronze Age, Tel El-Sakin became the southernmost fortress of Canaanite territory, its stone battlements standing as a last line of defense against Egyptian expansion. In 1650 BCE, during the time when Egypt was ruled by the Canaanite Hyksos, a new city emerged on the ruins of Tel El-Sakin. This flourishing urban center featured massive fortifications, temple complexes, and vibrant marketplaces. However, its prosperity was short-lived. Around 1550 BCE, when the Hyksos were expelled from Egypt, the city was violently destroyed, its palaces burned, and streets left in ashes. Egyptian forces, led by Pharaoh Ahmose I, reclaimed Gaza, once again bringing it under their rule. By the 15th century BCE, the city of Tel El-Ejul rose to prominence for the third time. Now a flourishing administrative capital, it became the residence of Egypt's governor in Canaan. The city featured grand palaces adorned with elaborate murals, towering gateways guarded by elite soldiers, and vast storehouses filled with grain, copper ingots, and precious gemstones. The city's markets buzzed with activity, as merchants from Mesopotamia, Syria, and Egypt haggled over exotic spices, incense, and hand-woven textiles. Caravans arrived daily, their camels laden with gold, lapis lazuli, and intricately crafted pottery. The streets echoed with the sounds of blacksmiths hammering bronze, potters shaping clay, and recording trade agreements on clay tablets. Gaza's strategic location made it a prize in the struggles between Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamian empires. One of the most significant conflicts occurred when Pharaoh Ahmose I launched a final campaign against the Hyksos stronghold of Sharuin, near Gaza. For 3 years, Egyptian forces laid siege to the heavily fortified city. The battlefield was filled with the clash of chariots, the hiss of flaming arrows, and the shouts of warriors. When Sharuin fell, it marked the end of Hyksos rule in the region and solidified Egyptian control over Gaza. Under Pharaoh Thutmose III, Gaza flourished as a key link along the Syrian-Egyptian caravan route. It was even recorded in the Amarna letters as Azza, a major center of commerce and governance. For 350 years, Egypt maintained a firm grip over the city, its influence extending deep into Canaan. By the 14th century BCE, Tel El-Ejul fell into decline. Once mighty promotions crumbled, and the city's role as a trade hub diminished. Temples and palaces, once filled with lavish decorations, were abandoned. As the Bronze Age ended, the city gradually disappeared from history, its ruins buried under layers of sand and time, waiting to be rediscovered. By the 12th century BCE, Egyptian rule over Gaza ended, paving the way for the Philistines, a seafaring people with Aegean ties. Following their defeat by Pharaoh Ramesses III, they settled along Canaan's southern coast, forming the Philistine Pentapolis, including Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. The Philistines transformed Gaza into a thriving hub, constructing fortified walls, harbors, and marketplaces filled with ceramics, weapons, and textiles. Skilled in metalworking, they introduced iron tools and weaponry, gaining a military advantage over neighboring groups. The Hebrew Bible recounts Gaza's early history, linking it to various peoples and events. It mentions the Avites, displaced by the Caphtorites, associated with Crete. Some scholars believe the Philistines descended from these early Caphtorite settlers. Gaza is famous in biblical tradition as the site of Samson's final act of defiance. After being blinded and imprisoned by the Philistines, Samson was led to their temple, where he toppled its pillars, bringing down the structure and killing himself and his captors. During King David's reign in the early 11th century BCE, biblical accounts claim Gaza fell under Israelite rule, becoming part of David's kingdom. However, when the United Monarchy split around 930 BCE, Philistia, including Gaza, allegedly came under Judah's control. Some modern historians question these narratives, suggesting the stories of Israelite/Judean rule over Philistia may be mythological rather than historical. The prophets Amos and Zephaniah foretold Gaza's destruction, predicting it would be abandoned and desolate. Whether these visions were based on actual events or symbolic warnings remains debated, but they highlight Gaza's turbulent past as a contested city between empires and civilizations. By the 8th century BCE, the Assyrian Empire expanded its control over Canaan, bringing Gaza under its dominion. During the reigns of Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon II, circa 730 BCE, the city became a crucial trade hub within the Assyrian-controlled territories. The bustling markets of Gaza were filled with spices, textiles, and precious metals, making it a prized possession for regional powers. However, Gaza's allegiance shifted in the 7th century BCE when it once again fell under Egyptian control. During this period, Egyptian influence was evident in architecture, religious practices, and trade networks, with Pharaoh Necho II reinforcing Egypt's grip on the region. By the dawn of the 6th century BCE, Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II sought to expand his empire westward. This led to intense confrontations with Egypt near Gaza. In 601 BCE, a decisive battle took place at Migdol, near Gaza, where Pharaoh Necho's army repelled Nebuchadnezzar's forces. However, Babylon did not retreat for long. In 568 BCE, during a second campaign against Egypt, Nebuchadnezzar launched a full-scale assault on Gaza, capturing the city after a brutal siege. The once thriving metropolis fell under Babylonian control, its fate intertwined with the shifting tides of empires. As the Babylonian Empire declined, the Persians under Cyrus the Great rose to dominance. By the 6th to 4th centuries BCE, Gaza entered a new era of relative independence under the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Unlike previous rulers, the Persians allowed Gaza a degree of self-governance, fostering a period of economic growth and prosperity. The city became a vital stop on the Persian Royal Road, a network that connected the empire from Susa to Sardis. Caravans laden with silks, exotic spices, and precious metals passed through its gates, ensuring its continued wealth. Greek cultural influences also began to seep into Gaza, paving the way for future Hellenistic transformations. During this time, Cambyses I, the Persian ruler, attempted an unsuccessful attack on Gaza in 529 BC, but the city remained resilient. A key indicator of Gaza's growing commercial power was the minting of its first coins between 420 to 410 BC, modeled after the Athenian currency. These coins symbolized Gaza's integration into Mediterranean trade networks, marking its role as a financial and commercial center. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great launched a fierce 5-month siege against Gaza, the last stronghold standing in his path to Egypt. The city, under the command of the eunuch Battus, was heavily fortified and defended by Arab mercenaries. Despite their valiant resistance for 2 months, Alexander's forces ultimately stormed the city, leaving behind a trail of devastation. The defenders fought to the death, while women and children were taken captive. Following the conquest, Gaza was resettled by neighboring Bedouins, who aligned themselves with Alexander's rule. Determined to integrate the city into his empire, Alexander transformed Gaza into a polis, embedding Greek culture, architecture, and governance into its foundation. Over the years, Gaza evolved into a flourishing center of Hellenic learning and philosophy, attracting scholars and intellectuals from across the Mediterranean. After Alexander's death, Gaza became part of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Gaza remained under Egyptian rule for nearly a century before shifting hands. By 200 BCE, it was absorbed into the Seleucid Empire, further solidifying its place as a hub of commerce, culture, and political intrigue in the Hellenistic world. During the 1st century BCE, Gaza played a crucial role as the Mediterranean trade port of the Nabateans, a powerful Arab kingdom whose spice-laden caravans traveled from Petra and Elath on the Red Sea. The city thrived as a commercial gateway between the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, and the Greek world, its markets bustling with frankincense, myrrh, and exotic textiles. However, Gaza's fortunes took a drastic turn in 96 BCE. Hasmonean king Alexander Jannaeus launched a brutal year-long siege. The city had sided with Ptolemy Soter against him, hoping for military aid from the Nabatean king Aretas II, but help never arrived. Betrayed and defenseless, Gaza fell to Jannaeus, who ordered a massacre of its inhabitants and reduced the city to ruins. For decades, Gaza remained a shadow of its former self, its streets littered with remnants of a once thriving civilization. Yet, despite its destruction, its strategic location ensured that it would rise again, continuing its role as a battleground for empires vying for control over this prized coastal city. In 63 BCE, Gaza was rebuilt and integrated into the Roman Empire by consul Aulus Gabinius, following the conquest of the region by Pompey Magnus. Under Roman rule, the city experienced 6 centuries of stability, economic prosperity. Its bustling port became a vital hub for trade between the Middle East and Africa, with merchants dealing in spices, textiles. By 30 BC, Gaza was granted to Herod the Great by Emperor Augustus. The city functioned as a separate administrative unit within Herod's kingdom, with Cascabar, the governor of Idumea, overseeing its affairs. Following Herod's death in 4 BCE, Augustus annexed Gaza to the Roman province of Syria. However, Gaza's peace was shattered in 66 CE when it was set ablaze by Jewish rebels during the First Roman-Jewish War. Despite the destruction, its strategic importance only grew after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Titus, the Roman general who besieged Jerusalem, passed through Gaza both before and after his campaign, and following Jerusalem's devastation, captives were sold into slavery in Gaza's markets. With the establishment of the Roman province of Arabia Petrea in 106 CE, trade routes linking Gaza to Petra and Ailo were restored, breathing new life into the city's economy. The city holds a place in Christian scripture as well. According to the Acts of the Apostles, Gaza was situated along the desert road connecting Jerusalem to Ethiopia. It was here that Philip the Evangelist encountered an Ethiopian eunuch, whom he baptized in a nearby water source, marking a pivotal moment in the spread of Christianity. In the year 130 CE, Gaza found itself at the center of imperial celebrations as Emperor Hadrian personally inaugurated grand athletic games in the city's newly built stadium. The arena roared with life as thousands of spectators gathered on its towering stone stands, cheering for their favorite athletes. Vivid banners of crimson and gold draped the arena's walls. Reflecting the city's Hellenistic Roman spirit, at one end of the stadium, a grand statue of Zeus, masterfully sculpted from marble, stood as a silent witness to the fierce competitions. Alongside him, idols of Aphrodite and Apollo adorned the temple. Hadrian himself, seated in an elevated imperial box, observed the contests with keen interest, his purple toga flowing as he approved. The games were not just a spectacle. They were a declaration of Gaza's grandeur under Rome's rule. As the Roman Empire evolved, so did the city of Gaza, but not without conflict. At the heart of the city stood the magnificent Temple of Marnes, a towering sanctuary dedicated to the chief deity of Gaza, Marnes, the god of fertility and rain. The temple was a masterpiece of Greco-Roman architecture, with tall Corinthian columns, golden torches illuminating its entrance, and an immense bronze idol of Marnes seated on an elaborately carved throne. Pilgrims from across the region flocked to offer sacrifices. Their prayers rose in thick clouds of incense towards the heavens. Yet, beyond the city walls in Maima, a different scene unfolded. There, in a humble stone building by the sea, whispers of a new faith echoed through dimly lit halls. A small group of early Christians gathered, their eyes filled with hope and devotion, reciting sacred scriptures by candlelight. Unlike the opulence of Marnes temple, their place of worship was simple, a wooden cross hanging above an altar, fish symbols carved into the stone. The divide between pagan Gaza and Christian Maima became a battle of ideologies. When Emperor Constantine declared Christianity the empire's official religion, the conflict intensified. Pagan priests marched through the streets, calling upon the citizens to resist. In secret, Christian conversions continued to baptize new followers under the cover of night. By the late 4th century, tensions reached their peak. A furious mob of Christian zealots, emboldened by imperial support, stormed the Temple of Mars. The golden torches that once burned in devotion to the god were overturned, setting fire to the richly embroidered tapestries. Marble columns cracked under the weight of destruction, and the bronze idol of Mars, once the pride of the city, was shattered into pieces. As the sun rose over Gaza the next day, the city that had once revered the gods of Olympus now embraced the cross. In the ruins of the temple, a grand church was erected, its bell tolling for the first time, signaling the birth of a new spiritual order. The streets no longer echoed with the chants of Zeus and Mars, but with the hymns of the Christian faithful, their voices rising to the heavens, where once only the smoke of pagan sacrifices had ascended. Join our journey through history. Support our continuity by clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Join the community of Morasel channel on YouTube and explore the fascinating stories of history. Islamic civilization. Uncover its philosophy, eternal values, and remarkable legacy. Modern European civilization. Witness the inventions and discoveries that transformed the world. Ancient civilizations. Journey through ancient Egypt, the dawn of civilization, with its majestic temples. Babylonian legends. Delve into eternal myths that shaped human history. Ancient Greece. Explore the birthplace of philosophy, democracy, and epic mythology, from Socrates and Plato to the glory of Athens and Sparta. Discover how we got here. Be part of our journey as together. During most of the 4th century, Gaza was a bustling city with wide, stone-paved streets, grand pagan temples, and a vibrant marketplace filled with merchants and artisans. The Christian community, however, was small, poor, and had no political influence. Their modest places of worship were overshadowed by the towering temples of gods like Mars, the city's principal deity. Religious tensions grew as Christianity spread under Saint Porphyrius between 396 and 420. In 402, after Emperor Arcadius issued a decree, imperial soldiers marched through the city, smashing statues of pagan gods and tearing down temple columns. The Grand Temple of Mars, with its towering marble pillars and golden altars, was reduced to rubble. Over the ruins, Empress Ilia Eudocia later ordered the construction of a church, its white limestone walls glistening under the Mediterranean sun. Despite the crackdown, secret pagan rituals continued in hidden courtyards and underground shrines. Christian persecution persisted, though it became less severe over time. The air in Gaza was thick with the scent of burning incense from churches and the distant echoes of hymns blending with marketplace chatter. By the 6th century, Gaza's Jewish community flourished, leaving behind remarkable archaeological evidence. A magnificent synagogue stood near the coast, its floor adorned with a mosaic of King David, dressed as a Byzantine emperor, playing the lyre. Merchants gathered inside, discussing trade deals, while scribes carefully transcribed religious texts by the soft glow of oil lamps. Gaza was depicted on the 6th century Medaba map, a mosaic masterpiece showing cities of the Holy Land. The city's northern border stretched to Wadi al-Hessi, marked by rolling hills and vineyards, while its southern boundary faded into the desert near Rafia. Within its territory lay towns like Bethalia, Asalia, Jerit, and Kisifim, each connected by dusty caravan routes. The heart of Gaza was a lively mix of narrow alleys lined with whitewashed houses, bustling markets selling pottery, silk, and spices, and grand civic buildings. Much of this ancient city remains buried beneath the modern Old City, where layers of history sleep beneath the streets. By 540, Gaza had transformed into a beacon of Christian scholarship and spirituality. Pilgrims in simple linen robes arrived in caravans, preparing for their long journey to Mount Sinai. The city's famed rhetorical school attracted scholars like Procopius of Gaza and Zacharias Reader, who debated philosophy and theology in shaded courtyards. The Church of St. Sergius, built during this period, was a marvel of Byzantine architecture, featuring intricate mosaics, towering arches, and candlelit sanctuaries filled with the scent of myrrh. The streets echoed with the footsteps of monks, their prayers blending with the distant hum of camel caravans passing through the city's gates. Beyond the city, monastic communities flourished. Figures like Hilarion of Gaza, Barsinophus, and Dorotheus led ascetic lives in desert caves and stone monasteries. Their influence shaped Byzantine and Slavic monastic traditions for centuries. The Madaba map confirms Gaza's status as the most important commercial hub on the southern coast of Palestine. Its bustling port welcomed ships loaded with amphorae of olive oil, sacks of spices, and rolls of fine silk. One of Gaza's most prized exports was wine, cultivated in the fertile land surrounding the city. Monks and farmers carefully tended vineyards stretching across rolling hills, crushing grapes in massive stone basins. The famous Gazan wine was stored in large clay amphorae, sealed with wax, and shipped across the Mediterranean. Roman aristocrats in Gaul, Byzantine nobles in Constantinople, and Egyptian merchants all sought after Gaza's sweet, rich wine. Scholars like Jerome, Sidonius Apollinaris of Gaul, and Isidore of Seville praised Gaza's wine, making it one of the city's most enduring legacies. Before Gaza fell to the Rashidun Caliphate, Islam had already begun to take root among its Greek-speaking Christian population. The city, known for its bustling markets and towering Byzantine churches, had also become home to an influential group of Arab merchants from Mecca, including Umar ibn al-Khattab. Prophet Muhammad himself visited Gaza more than once before his prophethood, walking its narrow streets lined with vendors selling spices, textiles, and incense. In 634, following the Battle of Ajnadain, the Rashidun army, led by Amr ibn al-As, with support from Khalid ibn al-Walid, besieged Gaza. Byzantine banners fluttered atop the city's stone walls as its defenders, including members of the Jewish community, fought alongside the imperial garrison. The siege dragged on for 3 years, and the summer of 637 saw its end when the Rashidun forces breached the city gates, storming the garrison. The conquest was not just a military victory, but also a turning point in Gaza's history. The city's Arab residents played a crucial role in facilitating its capture, and the site of Muhammad's great-grandfather, Hashim ibn Abd Manaf's tomb, was preserved and honored rather than destroyed. With the arrival of Muslim rule, Gaza's landscape underwent a dramatic transformation. The Grand Cathedral of John the Baptist, built over the ruins of the Temple of Marnes, was converted into the Great Mosque of Gaza. Byzantine churches now echoed with the rhythmic recitation of the Quran. The city's population rapidly embraced Islam, particularly within the urban core, while its rural surroundings remained slower to convert. Arabic became the dominant language, replacing Greek and Aramaic. And the Samaritan residents, fearing persecution, entrusted their wealth to their high priest and fled eastward. The call to prayer replaced the chiming of church bells, and the streets, once filled with Greek and Latin-speaking merchants, now bustled with Arabic-speaking scholars, traders, and travelers. Under Rashidun rule, Gaza was placed under the administration of Junfalastin, a military district in Bilad al-Sham, Greater Syria. This design continued under the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, linking Gaza to Damascus, Cairo, and Baghdad through vast trade routes. During the Umayyad period, 661 to 750, Gaza served as a minor administrative center. In 672, a powerful earthquake shook the city, though records of its effects remain separate. Despite political changes, Christians and Jews were allowed to continue their worship and trade. Bishop Willibald, who visited in 723, described a city where life persisted despite the political shifts, though economic prosperity had begun to wane. By the late 8th century, under the Abbasids, Gaza became a center for Islamic scholarship. In 767, the great jurist Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i was born in the city, later founding the Shafi'i school of Islamic law, one of the 4 major Sunni legal traditions. However, in 796, Gaza was devastated by Arab tribal conflicts, plunging it into chaos. Yet, by the 9th century, Persian geographer Istaqri described it as a thriving trade hub, where merchants amassed great wealth. Despite periods of decline, Gaza remained a significant waypoint for traders and scholars crossing the Levant. From 868 to 905, Gaza fell under the rule of the Tulunids, an Egyptian-based dynasty, before passing into the hands of the Fatimids around 909. The city's economy began to gradually decline, but cultural exchanges with the East introduced new agricultural products. By 985, the Arab geographer al-Maqdisi described Gaza as a large town lying on the high road to Egypt, on the border of the desert. He noted its beautiful mosque. Despite the city's hardships, poetry and scholarship flourished. The poet Sulayman al-Ghatsi, who later became Bishop of Gaza, wrote about the struggles of Palestinian Christians under Fatimid rule, while another local poet, Abu Ishaq Ibrahim al-Ghatsi, was born in 1049, continuing the literary tradition of the city. Yet, the decline of commerce continued as Gaza's port fell into neglect, and political instability, caused by Bedouin raids and struggles between local rulers, further weakened the city's prosperity. Trade routes, once bustling with caravans, saw a sharp decline. In 1100, the Crusaders seized control of Gaza from the Fatimids. According to William of Tyre, a prominent medieval chronicler, Gaza was desolate and in ruins when they arrived. Weeds overtook the abandoned streets, and the remnants of its once thriving markets lay beneath crumbling stone structures. Despite their victory, the Crusaders lacked the resources to fully restore Gaza's ancient hilltop defenses. Instead, in 1149, King Baldwin III ordered the construction of a small fortress, completing the strategic encirclement of Ascalon, the last Fatimid stronghold in the region. This new military outpost, though modest, stood as a symbol of Crusader dominance in southern Palestine. To consolidate Christian rule, Baldwin granted Gaza and its surrounding lands to the Knights Templar, an elite military order tasked with protecting pilgrims and defending Crusader territories. Under his decree, the Great Mosque of Gaza, formerly the Cathedral of John the Baptist, was converted back into a Christian cathedral dedicated to St. John. The city's transformation into a Crusader stronghold was now complete. By 1154, Arab traveler al-Idrisi described Gaza as very populous and under the control of the Crusaders. The city, now partially repopulated, began to regain some of its past vibrancy. In 1170, according to William of Tyre, a civilian settlement emerged outside the castle walls, albeit with weak fortifications and rudimentary gates. However, this fragile revival was short-lived. That same year, King Amalric I of Jerusalem withdrew Gaza's Templar Knights to bolster his forces against an Ayyubid army led by Saladin in Darum, a strategic point nearby. Sensing an opportunity, Saladin bypassed Amalric's forces and launched a surprise attack on Gaza itself. The Ayyubid army stormed through the unfortified settlements, setting them ablaze. Terrified civilians fled toward the Crusader stronghold, but the castle's commander, Miles of Plansey, refused them entry, fearing an imminent siege. Trapped and defenseless, the townspeople were slaughtered where they stood. For 7 years, the Knights Templar in Gaza prepared for another inevitable confrontation with Saladin. The fortress, though strategically placed, stood isolated after previous Crusader defeats in Palestine. The fall of Jerusalem in 1187 and the increasing pressure on Crusader territories meant that Gaza's fate hung by a thread. That same year, Saladin shifted his focus to Ascalon, the last formidable Crusader stronghold on the southern coast. Ascalon, known as the key to Palestine and the gateway to Egypt, was far more fortified than Gaza, with towering walls and a garrison that could withstand prolonged sieges. The siege of Ascalon lasted months, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Finally, in September 1187, realizing they could not hold out any longer, the Crusaders of Ascalon negotiated surrender terms with Saladin, agreeing to vacate the city peacefully. With Ascalon lost, the Templars in Gaza knew their resistance was futile. Cut off from reinforcements, they lacked the supplies and manpower to defend against Saladin's forces. Rather than face annihilation, the Knights Templar negotiated a surrender in exchange for the release of their Grand Master, Gerard of Rydford. Saladin accepted the deal, and in late 1187, Gaza fell without a fight. Determined to ensure that Gaza would never again serve as a Crusader stronghold, Saladin ordered the systematic destruction of its fortifications in 1191. The once imposing Crusader castle, with its stone towers and thick walls, was dismantled, leaving little trace of its former might. Despite Saladin's efforts, Gaza's fate remained uncertain. In 1192, during the Third Crusade, Richard the Lionheart launched a counteroffensive along the coast, capturing Jaffa and advancing southward. He briefly retook Gaza, and some sources suggest that he attempted to refortify the city. However, Richard's campaign was cut short by negotiations with Saladin. In 1193, the Treaty of Ramla was signed, bringing an end to hostilities between the Crusaders and Ayyubids. Under the terms of the treaty, the Crusaders retained control of a narrow coastal strip, including Jaffa, but were required to dismantle Gaza's defenses, ensuring that the city remained neutral and defenseless. This agreement effectively sealed the end of Crusader ambitions in Gaza. With the Crusaders expelled in 1193, Gaza entered a transformative phase under Ayyubid rule, marking the city's revival as a key trade hub and military stronghold. Under the leadership of Saladin's successors, efforts were made to rebuild its urban landscape, strengthen its defenses, and restore its economic role. Despite the devastation caused by decades of conflict, Gaza retained strategic and commercial significance. The city, situated at the crossroads of the Middle East, was a critical waypoint for pilgrims traveling to Mecca, as well as traders dealing in spices, textiles, and agricultural goods. By the early 13th century, the renowned Arab geographer Abu al-Fida described Gaza as a medium-sized city, possessing gardens and a seashore. This indicates that the city, while not yet fully restored to its former prosperity, was recovering and maintaining regional importance. To secure Gaza's position as a regional center, the Ayyubids initiated major urban and administrative reforms. One of the most significant developments was the construction of the Shuja'iyya district, an extension beyond the city's historic core. Established as both a military and administrative quarter, Shuja'iyya housed soldiers, officials, and traders, ensuring that Gaza could serve as a defensive and economic hub in the southern Levant. This expansion marked the first major growth of the city beyond its old city walls. The Ayyubids also reinforced Gaza's fortifications, not as a Crusader-style fortress, but as a defensible urban center. While Saladin had dismantled the Crusader defenses, his successors recognized the city's vulnerability and took measures to strengthen its gates and key access points. With the establishment of Muslim rule, Gaza saw a resurgence of Islamic scholarship and religious life. Several madrasas, Islamic schools, were established, attracting students from across the region. The city's great mosque, which had been converted into a Crusader cathedral, was restored as a place of Islamic worship. During this period, Gaza also became home to prominent Islamic scholars, contributing to the broader intellectual movement of the Ayyubid era. These scholars played a role in legal, theological, and administrative developments that shaped governance in the region. As the Ayyubid Sultanate weakened in the late 13th century, Gaza became a contested site between rival factions within the Muslim world. However, its strategic position meant that it remained a valuable prize for emerging powers, including the Mamluks. By the mid-13th century, Gaza's Ayyubid administrators found themselves negotiating shifting alliances as the Mongols advanced from the east and the Crusaders still held coastal enclaves. When the Mamluks decisively took control in the late 13th century, they built upon the Ayyubid foundations, turning Gaza into a military command post and trade center that would flourish in the following centuries. With the Ayyubid era drawing to a close, Gaza became entangled in the Mongol invasions, Mamluk consolidation, and shifting political alliances that shaped the late medieval Levant. The Mongols under Hulagu Khan reached Gaza in 1260, making it their southernmost point of conquest. They devastated the city, leaving behind a garrison before withdrawing upon Hulagu's recall to Mongolia. This withdrawal created an opportunity for the Mamluks, led by Baybars, to strike back. Later that year, Baybars expelled the Mongols from Gaza before achieving a decisive victory at Ain Jalut. Upon his return from battle, Baybars was proclaimed Sultan of Egypt, setting the stage for a century of Mamluk rule over Gaza and the wider Levant. Gaza's fortunes changed under the governance of Emir Sanjar al-Jali, 1311 to 1341, a powerful Mamluk official who spearheaded major urban renewal projects. He transformed Gaza into a regional bustling center, supervising the construction of a horse racing track, a madrasa, a new mosque, a caravansary, a maristan, and a fortress. Despite these improvements, political shifts in Cairo reduced Gaza's direct ties to the Sultanate in 1332. Under Sultan Nasir Muhammad, Gaza was placed under the authority of the Viceroy of Syria, Naib as-Sultana, Emir Tankais al-Huzami, limiting its previous administrative autonomy. In 1348, the bubonic plague swept through Gaza, devastating the city and claiming a significant portion of its population. This catastrophe mirrored the broader devastation of the Black Death across the Mamluk Sultanate and beyond. Just a few years later, in 1352, a rare but destructive flood further tested the resilience of Gaza's inhabitants, causing widespread damage to infrastructure and agriculture. Despite these hardships, Gaza demonstrated remarkable recovery. By 1355, the renowned Berber traveler Ibn Battuta visited the city and described it as large and populous, with many mosques. He specifically noted the Great Mosque of Gaza, which had been reconstructed by Sanjar al-Jali, a Mamluk governor known for his contributions to urban development. This rebuilding effort underscored Gaza's ability to rebound from adversity and maintain its role as a key urban center in the region. During the late 14th century, Gaza became a battleground for rival Mamluk factions as power struggles within the intensified Sultanate. In the early 1380s, Governor Agbuga as-Safawi conspired against Sultan Az-Zahir Barkak, leading to his exile to the fortress of Al-Karak. This period of instability continued into 1389, when Barkak was temporarily overthrown. Gaza fell under the control of Emir Yalbaga and Nasiri, a prominent Mamluk commander who had rebelled against him. However, Barkak quickly regained power in 1390, reasserting his authority over Gaza and restoring order to the city. Gaza's troubles were far from over. In 1401, a massive locust swarm ravaged the region, decimating crops and worsening economic difficulties. The crisis was exacerbated by internal conflict. Soon after, a fierce battle erupted between the Mamluk emirs Akberdi and Kansawa Kamsiya. Such conflicts reflected the broader volatility of Mamluk rule during this period. Nevertheless, Gaza retained its significance as an administrative and cultural hub. Between 1428 and 1433, the city was governed by Emir Sef ad-Din Ainal. Emir Sef ad-Din Ainal, a powerful Mamluk statesman, later ascended to the throne of Egypt as Sultan Ainal in 1453. His tenure in Gaza saw continued investment in public patron works, including his patronage of the Madrasa of Burdabak in the Shuja'iyya district. This institution became a testament to Gaza's enduring role as a center of Islamic scholarship and governance within the Mamluk realm. The year was 1516, and the winds of change were sweeping across the Levant. For centuries, the Mamluks had ruled over Egypt and Syria, their armored cavalry dominating battlefields. But their grip on power was slipping. In the east, a new force was rising, the Ottoman Empire, an unstoppable war machine expanding relentlessly under Sultan Selim I. Then came the Battle of Marj-Dabik. North of Aleppo, on the dusty plains, Mamluk Sultan Kansa al-Ghuri stood at the head of his army, unaware that treachery lurked within his ranks. As the battle raged, the Ottomans unleashed their superior artillery. The artillery cut through the Mamluk lines with devastating force. Panic spread. Some of al-Ghuri's own men defected. By sunset, the Mamluks were shattered, and their sultan lay dead on the battlefield. With this single blow, Ottoman rule over the Levant was all but sealed. In Gaza, a small but strategically located town, the news arrived swiftly. The Mamluk garrisons, sensing the inevitable, began their withdrawal. Traders whispered of the coming Ottomans, unsure whether they would bring order or destruction. By the time the Ottoman forces arrived, there was little resistance. A brief uprising flickered, but it was crushed with cold efficiency. The banner of the Ottomans was raised, and Gaza was now part of the ever-expanding empire. Shortly after the swift Ottoman conquest, Palestine was reorganized into 6 districts, one of which was the Gaza Sanjak. This strategic region stretched from Jaffa in the north to Beit Jibrin in the east and Rafah in the south, placing Gaza at the heart of the province. The Damascus Eyalet, under which Gaza fell, became the administrative backbone. This period also saw a major demographic shift. The Christian population of Shubak migrated to Gaza, transforming it into the largest Christian center in Palestine. The city became a key support hub for St. Catherine's Monastery in Sinai, strengthening its regional religious influence. Gaza's importance grew further under the leadership of Kara Shaheen Mustafa. Kara Shaheen Mustafa, a former janissary who had climbed the ranks to become a powerful military officer and later a trusted vizier of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, led Gaza. His governorship of Gaza was an interim appointment before becoming governor of Egypt, though his tenure was short-lived. After his deposition, his son Ridwan Pasha inherited his position, marking the beginning of the Ridwan dynasty, which would rule Gaza for over a century. Ridwan Pasha's career took him across the empire, serving as governor of Yemen, Ethiopia, Basra, and Diyarbakir, before proving his military prowess against the Safavid Persians in 1579. As a reward, he was granted the province of Anatolia, where he eventually died in 1585. The Ridwans, despite their vast regional influence, chose Gaza as their home, constructing a grand residence known as Qasr al-Basha, the Pasha's castle, a symbol of their enduring legacy in the city. Ridwan Pasha's son, Ahmad Pasha, governed Gaza for 3 decades, at times controlling the sanjaks of Nablus and Jerusalem. His political maneuvering secured him the governorship of Damascus Eyalet in 1601, but at the cost of heavy bribes to Ottoman officials in Istanbul. Ahmad Pasha's successor, Hassan Pasha ibn Ahmad, became known as Arab Hassan due to his deep ties with the Bedouin tribes. Under his leadership, the Ridwans became renowned for their mastery in controlling and allying with the Bedouin, making them a crucial force in Ottoman military campaigns. He led his Bedouin troops to victory against the rebel Druze emir Fakhr ad-Din, but was later appointed and eventually deposed as governor of Tripoli in 1644. Though militarily successful, Arab Hassan burdened the Ridwan dynasty with significant debt, in part due to his vast family. His many wives and concubines bore him 85 children, leading to internal power struggles within the dynasty. Upon Arab Hassan's death, his son Hussein Pasha inherited the governorship of Gaza, but the city was impoverished. Struggling under heavy Ottoman taxes imposed by Hassan Aga, the governor of Sidon Eyalet, Hussein resorted to borrowing a large sum from the French to cover the costs. Despite this financial strain, Hussein's rule marked a period of peace and prosperity for Gaza. He was highly regarded for his ability to ease tensions between the Bedouin and the settled population, fostering stability in the region. His son, Ibrahim, was appointed as the governor of both the Gaza and Jerusalem sanjaks. However, tragedy struck in 1660 when Ibrahim was killed while leading an expedition against the Druze in Mount Lebanon. Devastated, Hussein resumed direct control over Gaza. Under Hussein's leadership, the city thrived and flourished, earning the title capital of Palestine due to its economic and political significance. He spearheaded the restoration of the Great Mosque and oversaw the construction of 6 additional mosques, Turkish baths, and a bustling market. However, his growing influence drew suspicion from Istanbul. Anonymous petitions from Damascus accused him of failing to protect the Hajj caravan and favoring Christians, giving the Ottoman government an excuse to act against him. Hussein was arrested, imprisoned in Damascus, and later sent to Istanbul, where he died in captivity in 1663. After Hussein's imprisonment, his brother Musa Pasha took over the governorship, implementing a harsh anti-French and anti-Christian policy to appease the Ottomans. However, his rule was short-lived, and by the early 1670s, direct Ottoman-appointed officials replaced the Ridwans. With the Ridwan dynasty's removal, Gaza's golden age under Ottoman rule came to an end. The city, once a thriving hub of politics, trade, and culture, gradually declined in influence. The power vacuum left behind by the Ridwans led to instability, and Gaza would never again enjoy the same level of prosperity it had under their rule. For Gaza, the fall of the Mamluks had ushered in a new era of Ottoman dominance, and the Ridwans had transformed it into a political and cultural center. But as history often reminds us, even the most powerful families eventually fade, leaving only the echoes of their legacy behind. Join our journey through history. Support our continuity by clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Join the community of Morasel channel on YouTube and explore the fascinating stories of history. Islamic civilization. Uncover its philosophy, eternal values, and remarkable legacy. Modern European civilization. Witness the inventions and discoveries that transformed the world. Ancient civilizations. Journey through ancient Egypt, the dawn of civilization with its majestic temples. Babylonian legends. Delve into eternal myths that shaped human history. Ancient Greece. Explore the birthplace of philosophy, democracy, and epic mythology, from Socrates and Plato to the glory of Athens and Sparta. Discover how we got here. Be part of our journey.